Awesome.
Okay, so we talk about the Youth and Technology Hub on the beach in Lesvos, Greece. We thinking about here to create the ultimate destination. This is a sort of the elevated investor pitch in a way. The ultimate destination for holidays, learning, co-working, meeting, and building a global, a global community. We actually think of this as a social business venture for Lesbos. So there is a business case in there. It's not about charity. It's not about that. A place where, and again, coming back to the previous slide, we have a hotel, we have a co-working facilities, we have labs, maybe a fab lab and other facilities to do work. We have an academy where training is taking place, long-term, short-term, medium-term training. The technology plays a major role, because in view of possibilities and opportunities, which a location, and we talked about smart villages and things like this, certainly play a role. There's, of course, the beach, there's fun, there's entertainment, there's things happening in arts and culture. That all basically is based on combining work, business, experience, learning, training, living, and hospitality. It's a unique space that combines solutions for different needs, using the local resources in a sustainable and profitable way. That's quite important when we talk about such larger projects. In here, we would then, of course, looking into creating within that facility the co-working, the co-creation, the networking possibilities. We talked about good connectivity, using the different tools, making them available, working on the latest technologies for internet-based interaction and co-creation. But of course, there is sort of the general overall experience in there, which is work, fun, and then of course a good level of hospitality as well. And so you're creating through that a space where community becomes possible. Community is not just about networks. It's about people who begin to know each other, who lose, in fact, the limits of what you usually would have between people who don't talk to each other usually, and so on. So you're creating that. You're having in there, of course, all the facilities for health, everything what needs to do with educational training facilities, as we said, labs, which can go in all directions. Of course, it can be a training academy for hospitality and restaurants, etc., etc. So you would offer in there accommodation services, short, midterm, and longer term deals, which again accommodates different types of clients, if you want. There would be, everyone would be the customer, from students to workers to, again, the local people coming for day events. Maybe they want to spend the weekend there because something interesting is happening. So it's a modern place which is forward looking. There's catering, it has all the different events, parties, birthdays, anniversaries, conferences, you name it. So what would be the next steps in here? We would need to find a location. We would need to build a team, obviously, to develop a business plan, design the spaces and the activities, build a partner network, because it would be made available to a global partner network who would come in either virtually or physically. Of course, we would need to establish a company. We would need to invest, obtain the investment, which would be, I mean, to be honest, in the millions of euros eventually. And then, of course, build and operate the space. This is all about social entrepreneurship. If we look at it, we really want to think outside the box. We want to create a place which is unique in that sense, building up and the connectivity of Lesbos with similar spaces all over the world, with lots of partners all over the world. So that is in a couple of minutes the basic concept of the hub. That, of course, needs time to build up. Yeah, so that's where we are.
Sounds like a very, very good plan. It's a big vision. And from my point of view, I think that a couple of moonshots could help. But what you're talking about, more or less, as far as I understand, is, or probably it could be a good idea that we changed or turned Lesbos into a real big living lab for or more or less into a global living lab, because this could be very interesting. You mentioned before, or you compared it with a child that needs to be educated, and I think this is a great vision. Did you think a bit more about this? Is there anything like a timeline and so on, or how should or could this be started going on? Kilian.
Yeah, I mean, this sort of occurred to me because we're building something similar here in Tunis.
Yeah.
Obviously, these are bigger projects, and as a you would not do that. That requires time. It requires investment. It needs to convince people to put in whatever 5 or 10 million or whatever euros at least. So do you have a space which really functions? Now, that's why I think the discussion we have had so far is important, because it sort of designs the different stages of things. So creating that brain, creating that interconnectivity, that is something we can do pretty fast. And in a way, this is already happening here. And this could be built up into something more structured in a way where there is a regular sort of exchange and thematic discussions with leading to actual projects, to actual initiatives and so on, while we're working on the moonshot as sort of a booster. I see the moonshot exercise as a booster. And then, I mean, a project like this honestly, it takes at least 1.5 to 2 years, the minimum, to be off the ground. So this is not something, it's not a fast track activity. That's why I think it's important to build up something before that, which is creating and building up on the dynamic around the attention Lesvos has for the moment. As I say, look into a moonshot in a few months, which brings together that brain capacity, the brains, the solutions, the tech solutions, the concepts, best and worst practice, and so on, and saying and bringing that into very concrete action. So I think there's different stages, and so I really see this as sort of the end. Well, not the end. This is the next bigger stage, is to have this hub in operation, and we can create that virtual hub before already, and sort of confirm that in through a moonshot get together where we're bringing in the experts to further co-create the final activities. That's again also, as I mentioned before, as an approach we are trying now in southern Tunisia, in a very stunning place, where we want to bring through a series of workshops. Actually, we're building up a global community around that particular place called Douhet, which has architectural wealth, which has climate change challenges but also opportunities, and it has lots of possibilities around the income generating business streams and tourism. So it's something similar where you're building up the project as you move on. And it's very important not to have preconceived ideas. And I think this is the whole discussion we have been having today is all around that. There is not such a thing as we decide now, we basically write up a project and we go to donors and then it will be, that's it. This is work in progress. There cannot, there should not be a finished, finalized product from day one. That's work in progress, and that can only happen if as many people as possible contribute.
I agree. I totally agree, Kilian. First of all, a few minutes ago you were talking about those silos, okay? Silos thinking. One of the secrets why the moonshot works is that we work on all tasks in parallel and not as a sequence. So referring to the Lesvos hub, I have a few questions. First of all, shouldn't there be a bigger context because it is one hub on an island, okay? But first of all, I think what important steps before are, for example, the inclusion of the Lesvos locals, okay? And then it's also a question of kind of a positioning statement, because we probably could make Lesvos or turn Lesvos into a very well educated child. Okay, as I mentioned before, it could be a living lab for the world, because we are facing so many problems, not only about migration, it's climate, it's environment, pollution, and so on and so on. So probably we could change Lesvos into some kind of a perfect place. But what else would we need beyond a hub where people can work whatever they want to do there? Have you ever thought about this? What about if we think it in the biggest possible scale from the beginning on?
Yeah, but again, I mean, this concept is applicable anywhere in the world, and it's basically building up in Europe, which is, at least until recently, was wealthy and well connected, and people spend a lot of money on thinking about new ways of co-working and co-creating and so on. And that's where concepts such as the student hotels, and again, I mean, that's also very much connected to movement on the ground and Lesbos and so on already, has been successful because it's such a space. Of course, again, and that's, and I repeat myself here, that's why we talked about building up a community around this already. And I think this is where I think Vasily and the team and the people who have been speaking here are challenged to think of how we could already put in challenges which are available to a global community. And then again, elevating issues, invisible issues, to make them visible and accessible to people who are saying, yeah, but we have done that and it works this and this way in our place. So why don't we look at it from that perspective and so on? So that can be done basically immediately. So there's no delay in this. As I said, for me, the hub is just a physical confirmation, and it would help also to bring less connected people, and that people living in Lesbos, into something which is attractive, where things are happening, where they can go, and where there's an activity ongoing, which is of interest, where people can learn, where they can get new ideas. I mean, as I said, the olive tree farmer can go and finally gets eventually some new stimulus for his products and how to do that, maybe some other products, and so on and so forth.
Okay, just to get it right, sorry for interrupting you. There are more target groups. It's not about refugees, asylum seekers, but also to start up guys from around the world, or who is exactly the target group?
This is so you missed actually the previous discussion to a large extent. So we're talking about
I'm
different
sorry. Okay.
types of communities. So we're having a global the startups, the geeks, the people who have technology solutions, also very traditional also companies and researchers and scientists and whatnot, all have something to offer.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
You have the tourists who are looking for
Yeah.
something else. So there's a different type of tourism emerging increasingly in many places. Greece in general has to, and this was my observation when I lived in Greece, has to adapt to this new type of people looking for other opportunities. There are the digital nomads, there's students, there's institutions which looks for spaces where they can carry out work, where they can have conferences, workshops, and so on. I mean, in that interconnected world, so we have definitely different, let's call them, although I don't like the word communities, which would be accessing and would be sort of harnessed by a physical location as well as a digital platform solution.
Okay.
You bring all that together, and there's a very important part again, which is this sort of the access to people who are less digitally connected today, and so on. So obviously the newcomers in Lesbos would be, of course, part of that. There would be part of it included in the, let's say, target quote unquote customers. But at the same time, they are not the prime, let's say, beneficiaries or so of this location. So this is a place which is commercially run. It needs to bring in money so that you can actually, out of this, do things. And that's why there is a very strong element of hospitality. There is a cost recovery. There's profits. There's things like that. You have to run that in that aspect and in that direction, as many of the successful, let's say, hubs and so on are doing. I mean, Impact Hub or others, they all have a commercial sort of business model behind it. And so here we're talking about that as well. So you have to actually make sure it's constantly operating.
Okay.
But it gains its strength because it's not only just a place, because it is actually one of the nodes of that global brain.
Yeah.
So we're elevating Lesbos out of looking only at its own, at itself. So we're making Lesbos, in fact, part of a network. And so when I'm talking about Tunis or other locations, that becomes increasingly an interconnected world where let's say, things are happening. And let's maybe take the Mediterranean context as one, and that's very much linked, and my theme is migration, very much linked to creating a different type of, not always looking in direction of Northern Europe as the ultimate nirvana and the destination, but looking at other spaces as where it's worthwhile of living, working, and learning.
Okay, now I understand. Okay. Vasily, what's your point of view about that? About the idea, the vision? I think I can't hear you. I'm sorry. Probably. Vasily?
I was on mute, guys. Sorry. Yeah, of course. Yeah.